Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, we have had a holiday weekend. It's been a lot of fun stuff the last few days, but the biggest thing that happened was yesterday, you and I launched a new book. Congratulations, Lead Every Day is now out in the wild. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I'm thankful that we've gotten that one out the door.
Yeah, it's been so fun, and I'm already hearing people, they've gotten their book. We've got people listening to audio books already, and I think Kindle, however that works, they've got the electronic. I'm sure people were going to be getting them in the mail today that ordered them, but I'm fired up, man. 3 essential disciplines to unleash the passion and performance of everyone around you. And you and I talk about this all the time, but how fun would it be if everybody in the world got to have a good leader? That'd be pretty incredible. And yet so many times we know that we got bad leadership everywhere. And so yeah. I believe this book is really going to help people with these 3 disciplines we've identified in our operating system. I think it gives people a way to frame up their leadership and maybe in a what I'll call a disruptive way, which is relevant for today's conversation. Yeah. I think it's going to go a little bit back to the basics, which I think so many people these days are just grabbing at the latest, greatest stuff, and they really don't have a way to think about their leadership. So I believe this book is going to be helpful, and it certainly was an honor to be able to partner with you on this thing. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to help a lot of people.
It is. And, the language we've used throughout is that we're presenting an operating system. And without kind of doing a commercial for the book, I want to answer a question a lot of people have already asked when they hear that. It's like, well, I'm not sure I need an operating system. Well, my response is every leader has one. The question is it up to date? Is it current? Or was it cobbled together with a few best practices, a few old wives' tales, some hard-won victories and some mistakes you've made? You've got one, but think about a phone from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It just won't do what a phone will do today. And an operating system that has been haphazardly created, kind of a hodgepodge, it will never perform at the level that you want it to perform at. And so I think a lot of leaders are going to look at an operating system with fresh eyes, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Speaking of fun, it's funny. A few months back, I had a phone. It's an older phone, actually a little bit older phone, and I tried to run the update to the operating system. Ours is a leadership operating system. Your phone has an operating system to help with all the apps and emails and all the. I don't know exactly how it works. I just know when it works and when it doesn't. And I tried to update my operating system, and it said I didn't have enough storage, and so I had to. Cobble it together was the word you used. That's right. And I'm just, there's so many, by the way, I got it to where I need to be. So I'm good. I'm still alive here on the technology side, but I can't tell you how many leaders I run into that have an outdated way of thinking about their leadership. We just live in a different world than we've ever lived in before. And the whole, there's not enough storage. That might be true for the phone. For the leader, it's typically, there's not enough capacity. And I think this book is, again, I will do a commercial for it. I think every leader needs a copy, maybe a copy for everybody in your organization, every leader in your organization to go through, because I think this will really increase the capacity and the way you think about becoming a better leader, improving your team's performance, and ultimately strengthening the organization. And so much benefit comes off of that when high performance really is on the line here when we think about it, but high impact as well, and
sure,
and legacy. So I hope people will get a copy of that.
Let me say one more thing about the book. People always ask me about how long does it take to write a book, and it obviously varies from book to book. But this one, I guess, took about 70 years. If you think about all of your leadership experience and all of my leadership experience, plus the work that our teams have done over the last 25 years. This has been the longest book in the making of anything I've ever worked on.
Yeah. It's the same way here. It's like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. Okay, so today I want to refer back to one of your older books. It got me thinking. You wrote Uncommon Greatness, you remember, and in that book, one of the things that we talk about, or you talked about, and we've written about and talked about and trained on, is that leaders are one of their fundamentals is they reinvent continuously. And if you remember, Mark, we talk about three different ways that leaders are always needing to reinvent their self, their systems, their structure. There probably are other ways that we need to even think about reinventing, but we like to give them a framework to think about that. So we did that. But one of the things I don't think we've ever really talked about is leaders can reinvent through this little word that is I think it'll give us a jolt today to think about this as a way to reinvent. And the word is disruption. And so I want to think about disruption today. I don't know that you and I have ever really talked about disruption as a leadership practice at least as much as we probably should have. I know we're always disrupting stuff, and we both value this, but let's talk today to the leader who's listening about how to disrupt and how to do it in a positive way. I think there is a positive way to do it and a negative way to do it. And so let's talk disruption today. You with me?
Absolutely. I think it's a relatively common strategy, but I'm not sure that leaders, A, give it enough thought or consideration, and B, I'm not sure that all the leaders I've known have used disruption strategically. Some of them are just like a bull in a china shop, and disruption is kind of their MO. And you can talk about pros and cons there. That's not really what we're talking about, or breaking everything that you run into. I think we're talking about thoughtfully and purposely deciding when is disruption called for. And then today we're going to unpack, I don't know, at least a half dozen different forms that disruption can take. And I believe for many leaders, this will be some new thinking.
Okay, so you mentioned the bull in the china shop mindset. Talk a little bit before we jump into these things that we can do to do this in a positive way. Talk a little more about what does negative disruption look like, Mark? I mean, we've all seen it, but it's the leader who doesn't give a lot of thought to it, obviously. But how does it show up? Give me some picture here.
I think it shows up in chaos. I think it shows up in random acts of change. When a leader feels the need to mix it up, but they've got no strategic intent. Just lack of strategy, lack of intent, and chaos. Those would be some of the first things that come to mind. How about for you?
Yeah, I think I've seen the leader before who would just change something for change's sake. It's just like, I feel like we need to change something. And so they'll just, again, I think you're right. There's no strategy behind it. It's just, it is almost just like, I feel like it's time for change. And we've heard change for change's sake. I've also seen before leaders who feel like that they have this fresh vision, a fresh moment. You know, they go away, they find a way to say something and they'll change something and everybody will get on board. And then 4 or 5 months later, maybe the leader's not as locked into what's really happening and how long it takes to initiate change or for disruption to not just be disruptive, for it to be positive and create alignment. And so they'll come up with a new way to say something. And then, you know, right when people are learning the old way, the new thing comes, and it's just, there's this constant change. And I think that can, again, I think disruption sometimes can be a positive thing, but I think it can be disruptive in a negative way, like we're describing. So I would just warn the leader out there. We're not just saying go change something today. We're going to give you some specific ways to think about this in a strategic way, I guess is really the way to say it.
And let me add something to what you just said, and you'll remember this, and some of our listeners may as well. When we did our work on culture several years ago, one of the toxins, we talk about a toxin as patterns of unhealthy or unproductive behavior. And toxins, if not addressed, they'll metastasize and they will kill an organization. Literally, they can take them out. And one of the toxins we identified, we called it whiplash. And it's when the leader is changing for change's sake, or maybe in their head or in their heart, there's some strategy involved. But when the change is too frequent, when it's too cataclysmic, what people end up doing is they sit back and they wait because they've learned based on this leader's tendency and based on history that there'll be a new vision, there'll be a new change, there'll be a new initiative in a matter of weeks or months. And so basically the leader loses fellowship. And sure enough, in most of those cases, in 30, 60, 90 days, the leader's got some other shiny new thing, and that's the thing. And people are sitting around, they find that very confirming. Yeah, we were good not to jump on that last one, or we would have wasted all that time and energy. And guess what? We're not going to work on this one either. And so I think that's a great cautionary note, even as we talk about disruption. It requires some discernment, and it requires some judgment. I was talking to a group of leaders last week, and we were talking about the importance of skills, but I had this real sense that these men and women might be geeking out on the skills. I'm going to learn to do this. I'm going to learn to do that. And I said, you need leadership skills, but ultimately you need judgment and you need discernment, because you've got to decide even which skill to deploy here and which tool to use there and when to sit back and when to initiate. So, you know, you and I have devoted much of our lives to trying to help leaders learn the skills. But when you talk about disruption, you're going to have to take a beat. You're going to have to reflect. You're going to have to consider the consequences and the options and say, is it time for disruption?
Yeah. I think a question you've asked me for years, that's been, I've said for the last few years, this might be the best leadership question, is what are we trying to accomplish? And that question might be a good one to, like, when we're thinking about disrupting something, I think this keeps us on track with the strategy part. Like, what are we really trying to do here? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's a good question again for that. So
I've modified that question. So I'm going to help you take your game to the next level. For a long time, I might have been saying and thinking, what are we trying to accomplish? And now I've added the word specifically, comma.
Yeah.
What are we trying to accomplish? Let's be as specific and as targeted as possible. And that question is probably the question I ask most in my life. On a good day, I might ask that dozens of times before I send an email, before I send a text, before I go into a meeting, as it relates to specific items on an agenda. And it really does help keep me focused. And
it'll keep you focused and strategic. Exactly.
Thinking
That's
strategically.
Good. All right, so let's give the listener here some mechanisms to create positive disruption. I think we got a great little list here. Start us off. Like, if we're going to do this, if we're going to disrupt, like, what beyond what are we specifically or really trying to accomplish? Where would you go first, Mark?
Yeah. Okay. So one mechanism that I know you're familiar with, because you used this just recently with our team, and it's what I say with all respect. I mean, all these are in play. So some of these may sound a little punitive or pejorative. No, these are good things, but a leader can use an unreasonable deadline. I don't know if you remember this or not. We were in a meeting with our team. We're talking about a total remake of our website. And I've done this enough to know, given the magnitude and scope of this, it's probably an 18-month project. And you said, let's do it in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, the jury's out, right? What will we get done in 6 weeks? But here's what I will tell you. Not only was that disruption strategic, because we realized we've got 40,000 people a month coming to our website, and it's not good right now. And there's some broken links, and there's some stuff that none of us are proud of. And so this was strategic on your part. And whether we finish it in 6 weeks or not, we're going to accomplish a whole lot more than if you said, yeah, it'd probably take 18 months. Because I've also been involved in those projects when at the end of 18 months, you're still 6 months away from the deadline.
Or if you do finish it in the 18 months, it's typically the last 6 weeks. There's this mad sprint to the finish. I got some of this thinking actually from one of my son-in-laws is a software engineer, and they use the whole Scrum mindset, and they'll set themselves basically I don't know exactly how their timeline is, but they do like these 2-week sprints, and it's amazing how much they get accomplished with just knowing we've got a deadline, we got to focus. Now we stay late sometimes, and then we have a little break after the sprint and we move on to the next one. But I love that mindset of just saying there's urgency here is we're going to create some disruption. A deadline can be a powerful one. Another one, Mark, that I think can happen is is through let's say you have a limited budget. What could we do if we weren't allowed to spend any money? Or could we do if we were only allowed to spend $1 million as opposed to 7 million or whatever? I mean, you can pick your number, but, or I like these crazy kind of questions. What would we do if we had to double our business in the next year, or they were going to make us shut it down versus, or even if we had to double our business in the next year, but we could only have half the people that we have right now? What would we do? And that all of a sudden causes us to think crazy different things, and maybe something we'll come up with something that actually might be a good, strategy to move forward. So I like these crazy questions.
Well, and let me say this about budget. Sometimes, and you've probably been there, I've been there many times, when you have a specific budget and it may be a fraction of what you want or need, well, that can be a disruptor, because you may or may not significantly alter the desired outcome. You may say, well, no, we still need to do X, but we've got 10% of what we wanted or 50% of what we wanted. So sometimes it can be very specific. And I've even seen it work. Now, I'm not sure I can pull this off, but I saw Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, do this one time. The team went to him and they wanted to roll out a new product, and it was going to require retrofitting equipment in every restaurant. Thousands of restaurants had to get this new equipment, and many of them needed new vent hoods. And I won't reveal the number, but it was a really big number. And Truett just looked at him and said, no. And they'd been working on this for years, right? I mean, we had a great product and they had a great rollout plan and they had done all the numbers and the math. Truett said no. And they were like, say that again. And he said, no. And they said, well, is there something specific that's concerning you? He said, that's too much money. And they said, like, okay, like they're waiting on him to say, do it for this or do it for that. He said, come back when you can do it for less. And it took them, I don't know, 6 months, and they cut millions out of it. And they went back and said, Truett, thank you for that challenge. We went back to the drawing board and we can cut X million out of it. And here's the new number. And he said, okay, go ahead and do it.
That's great. That's so great.
So I just thought that was cool.
You mentioned Chick-fil-A there. One of the other things that we can do to disrupt, I think a specific way, is to set stretch goals. And you've got a great story there about the power of this. Will you share that story? I think this is so powerful.
Yeah. I don't know how many years ago it was. I could probably figure it out. Maybe 10 years ago, Chick-fil-A had decided that we were going to move away from the focus and priority that we had put on leadership development. So stay with me. There's a happy ending here, because I still contend, and I think many within Chick-fil-A would agree, leadership is actually the organization's competitive advantage. So you can imagine it sent shockwaves through some parts of the business, particularly for my team and my teams, because we were the ones championing this whole leadership development initiative at the charge from the CEO. And so it's like, okay, what? This is kind of crazy. And so I was briefing my senior leader on where these decisions had landed. And he said, well, you've really been focused on trying to serve 1,000 leaders, which was a bit oversimplified, but we had 1,000 restaurant operators at the time. And so I said, well, that's our primary audience, but we try to serve beyond that, including the corporate staff. And he thought for a second and he said, well, what if you found a way to serve 10 million leaders? He said, I bet those 1,000 out there would find your content if it was so prevalent that 10 million leaders a year were finding your content. And so I went back to the team and said, hey, here's a crazy idea. What if we tried to find a way to serve 10 million leaders? And somebody younger than me on the team, this was a couple of years back, they said, that's possible. And I said, what have you got in mind? And they said, have you heard of something called the internet? And it was from that conversation, from that stretch goal, I started blogging back when blogging was all the rage. And you coached me during that season. I was doing 3 a week and did hundreds of them over several years. And at one point, we had served over 9 million leaders in 1 year, because of a stretch goal. Now, you and some of our listeners have heard me say that I'm pondering what do you do to serve 100 million leaders? But that's another story for another day. But it was that stretch goal that was really disruptive because we hadn't been thinking beyond, not much beyond 1,000. And it was a wise leader that said, yeah, you got to think a lot bigger than that.
That's so good. Well, and honestly, a lot of that, when all that was going down, that's actually, I got connected to Chick-fil-A and we started doing a lot of training with them ourselves. And now as I look back on all that and, now that we're getting to work together here, a couple of things that I just saw actually last week between, the podcasts that we've done, a couple of podcasts that we've done, I think we've now 500,000 downloads, which is pretty cool. And this specific podcast, over 150 countries now, Mark, that people are downloading and listening to the Lead Everyday show. So all that happened. I say all of it. I mean, there was, it was a confluence of stuff going on, but a lot of that happened way bigger than what it would have had you just been thinking about how do we help 1,000 people. And so that disruptive stretch goal was pretty powerful. Okay, Mark, another one is and I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, but there's different scenarios and I like some of the way you talk about this. Can you give us, how would you, if you were leading a team, a lot of people listening here, they're leading a team, give us some scenarios to help them like disrupt the way things are going and lead to greater performance.
Well, I think, yeah. Are you referring to me? There's a cousin, maybe you feel like we covered it, but I don't want to miss just the outlandish, absurdly huge. Cause by the way, back to that 10 million, that felt really big at the time. And even today, when I talk about 100 million, people go, that's not that many in today's world. Right. Well, what about the stuff that is so out there? It's like it's beyond comprehension. I think you can disrupt that way. And the quintessential example is when President Kennedy said, hey, we're going to put men on the moon and return them safely before the end of the decade. A lot of our younger audience may not remember that. He said that in 1963. Guess what? The technology did not exist to accomplish that goal. So to me, that's in the outlandish bucket.
That's just crazy at that time.
Yeah, that's just, it's absurd. And so every now and then a leader's got to go like to a crazy place. But in that specific example, that was very strategic, had geopolitical implications. We won't get into all the history behind it, but the United States was behind the Soviets at that point in the space race. And the president said, we have got to do something bold. We have got to be disruptive. So don't confuse something like that with 10 million or 100 million. Those things are doable. The strategies and tactics are known. Sometimes you got to go way out on a limb and say, we're going to accomplish something nobody even knows how to do.
Yeah.
And over the course of that decade, NASA employed about 400,000 scientists, engineers, and civil servants, employees to make that possible.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So don't miss the crazy stuff. You may not want to let your brain go there, but you should, at least to consider some of those things that might be the perfect disruptor for your team.
That's what I was talking about earlier when I said, what if we had to double our business with half our staff? But you might want to even connect these dots as a listener here. What if I told you next year, and this might not matter for some of you, but what if for some of you, depending on the size of your business and the amount of eggs you have in one basket, what if I told you you're going to lose your top 5 customers next year? What would that look like? Right. Or Mark, I know you guys did some contingency planning, even around the idea of chicken. I mean, share that. I mean, that to me is powerful.
Yeah. Again, one more chicken example for today. 10 years ago or so, when the bird flu first appeared in some other parts of the world, it has reoccurred since then. We put teams together to figure out, so what do we do if we can't sell chicken? Now, even if it's for a season, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah.
If it only lasted 30 days, much less, what would you do if it lasted 6 months? And that team went as far as to create alternative non-chicken products that we could sell. And so, you hope and pray that you never have to do something like that.
But everybody listening, if your business got totally outlawed, what would you do? I mean, would you just pack it up and go home? You could, but there's a chance that if you've done some thinking and working together, and I know this happens a lot. I was meeting with a guy, he had a team of electricians, and they felt like, and it was going really well. I mean, it's a massive company. And he said, we're going to get into the plumbing business, and we feel like we can do that because we've built enough leaders here in this. And so, in other words, they're thinking about another vertical, but that's disruptive to what they were doing. And yet it goes back to similar what you're talking about here. I think that's just so powerful for a leader to keep pushing and what could we do and how could we help and all that stuff. So that's great. Okay. So let's do this, Mark, today. Before we go, we got a few more minutes here. Let's take a little bit of time and let's see if we can identify some questions. We might even create a PDF here out of these questions today. I think we could come up with some questions for the individual and then some questions for the team. And I think these questions could help if you're really wanting to try to disrupt in a positive way. So if you're game, let's jump into some of these questions.
Let me say this. I'm envisioning, I'm not sure how you interpret this. I think questions are a category all by themselves. They're a mechanism just like these other things we just talked about.
Yeah, that's a good call out.
So let's just say, hey, I got a lot of tools in my toolbox to create disruption. And I think questions are really powerful. And for whatever reason, I think they're undervalued and often overlooked.
That's fantastic.
So I think we will share some. Let's share some for the individuals, and let's share some that you could use for the team.
All right, that's great.
You want to share the first one?
Yeah. So let's start with. I think sometimes we start with these assumptions that we have, and so I just would ask myself, what assumptions have I accepted that are limiting my effectiveness? And maybe even like if you hired a coach, what would like a big time coach, an executive leadership coach, what would be the first thing they would tell you? It is as you start thinking about your assumptions and the way you do things, and your maybe you're change averse. I mean, there's all kind of stuff that we could unpack there, but I think let's just start with the assumptions that we make that sometimes maybe limit the way that we're chasing effectiveness. And to me, that's a really good first question.
Yeah. And you and I,
what is it that
I was going to say, you and I are working through.
Say, what is it that I can do that nobody else can do? Any of those kind of things would be powerful.
Yeah, we're working through inner excellence right now. And it's built on the fact that many of us are working with limiting, he calls them presuppositions, but there's some beliefs and some assumptions that we can adopt and cultivate in our lives that will actually not only change our outlook, but it will enhance our performance. And so that's a book. If you've not checked it out, you may want to.
That's good. Give us another question for the individual, and then we'll do a couple for the team.
What's the most obvious problem or opportunity that remains unaddressed? I had the opportunity last week to lead a workshop from an extremely well-led team. One of our clients that's been a client for 6, 7, 8 years. One of the best companies you'll find anywhere. And I had about 20 emerging leaders in the room. And I asked them, were there critical gaps? Were there opportunities? Were there things that they were aware of that had not been addressed that would strengthen their team or the organization? And the place just lit up. And that happens everywhere I go. It's like, well, why don't we ask those kind of questions, and then let's make a list. Let's rank order those based on their impact on the team or organization, and let's go after those things. But sometimes we're not asking that question. And then if we do, we don't follow through on it. And I think that's a real missed opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we've got 3 or 4 more questions for the individual. We'll put these in a PDF and put them in the show notes, but I want to cover a couple of questions for the team. If you're gonna positive disruption kind of mindset here, I love this first question. Go to the team and ask the team, what should we stop doing? What should we stop doing? This is such a powerful question. And I know, Mark, you even had one time a team that you had this meeting and you kind of told them up front, we're going to have a meeting about what we should stop doing. And didn't you, they couldn't come to the meeting if they didn't come with,
everybody had to come with an idea, at least one.
Yeah, they had to come with an idea. You're like, that's the admission to the meeting. And now all of a sudden, I'm sure you had all kind of great ideas, great discussion going on because you were willing to, and secure enough to ask that question. And I've heard for years, if you are the leader, you should really ask the people around these kind of questions, because somebody told me one time, it doesn't do you any good to not know what they're thinking. I'm not sure the English is right there, but like they're thinking it, whether you know it or not. And so this conversation, real conversations with real people, as Howard Behar from Starbucks once told us, that's a great question. What should we stop doing? And everybody's probably got an opinion there, and it's gonna lead to some fascinating conversations.
Yeah, and let me put the period on that idea. We did have the meeting. We didn't promise people we were going to stop doing everything you walked in the room with, but we had informed, collaborative conversations, and we probably stopped doing a third of the things that people said we could stop doing, this and this and this. And some of them we decided to keep for a season, and let's surface this again, because if we still feel this way in 30, 60, 90 days, maybe we should try and experiment and eliminate more. But so you don't willy-nilly just stop doing stuff. You still need to be thoughtful. Leader has to still bring some judgment and discernment. You use the collective wisdom of the team, but that's a disruptive question. What should we stop doing?
Well, and I'll take a little side road here. I think it's such a powerful question, because it's if we can identify some things that we really should stop doing, the reality is those things are sucking up resources and man hours and all that stuff. And so we're allowed to take that capacity that we create through those kinds of questions and deploy it somewhere else. So I love that one. Give me one more for the team before we land this today.
What could we do to significantly improve the performance of our team over the next 30 days?
Love that.
You can put as many parameters on that as you want, but people have ideas on that. And as you said earlier, it doesn't help you to not know what they're thinking, but that would be a disruptive question. And you just got to get ready for those answers.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So I'm going to leave our listeners today, Mark, with two things. Number one, I would remind you, Lead Every Day is out now. If you want to have a framework, an operating system really to build toward high performance, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of Lead Every Day. Again, Mark, excited about that. Congrats on it being out in the world. That's going to be fun. But here's my final question for you today. What do you need to disrupt? What do you need to disrupt? The listener out there, I'm guessing there's something. It's gotten a little stagnant. It's gotten a little stale, and you've plateaued. It may be time to disrupt. I hope you'll take some of these things we've talked about today, download the PDF in the show notes, and let's see if we can't make the world a better place. All right, we'll leave it there, Mark. Any final thought? You good? All right, we'll just remind you guys, the best leaders lead every day.